today she's going to share with us or walk us through rights and royalties registrations. So Anne-Marie, I will pass it over to you.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I know there's a little bit of confusion here. It says presented by Anne-Marie Dyer, and I'm just noticing it still says Anne-Marie Smith under my name. I just got married, and I'm still in the process of trying to change over my name to my married name and all of that. So there's this little bit of a toggling going on between identities. So that's why I just noticed the name change there. So it's really good to be here. I'm really happy that I can participate and walk through these rights and royalties. I just want to make sure everyone understands that, you know, because this is only an hour, this is going to be a very general overview. I'm sure that there is so much more content that could be presented that I'm obviously not going to be able to have the time for today. So it really is going to be a general overview, but I'm hoping it's going to be as clear as possible and sort of get into what I like to call the real rights of the music industry. Just a really quick second, I teach at Seneca College and at Harris Institute for the Arts. I have my own business management company, and my clients are friggin' amazing. USS, Iskwé, North by Northeast, Polaris Music Prize. So, you know, it is such an honor and privilege to work with all of these artists, all of these administrators, all of these copyright owners. I'm coming at you from Trinidad. Trinidad has closed their borders until a future date. So I am currently across the pond, if you will, or across the ocean. I do want to say sometimes the internet gets a little bit unstable here, so I might be stuttering, and if you need me to repeat anything, please let me know. Please let me know if there's anything that needs to be repeated or gone over again and whatnot. So I just want to get right into it, and I had a little bit of an overview of the attendee list. And it looked like obviously there's a lot of managers. I saw publicists, I saw some industry professionals, some professionals from the organizations that I'm actually going to be doing an overview on. And I don't want to call you out because I want to obviously preserve your privacy, but if I come to an organization, I'm going to be sharing my screen on the various website pages of the collection agencies, some of them to include SOCAN, CMRRA, Resound, Connect Music, and Sound Exchange. And if you represent any of these organizations, and only if you're comfortable, only if you're good with it, if you can send me something, we were just trying to figure out how the best approach would be. But I think that if you are comfortable with it, and I do get to that page and I call and say, is there anyone here that can lend further explanation to your organization, put up your hand, and Andrea and Amy will unmute you. It would be gold for the rest of the attendees to get to know you, get to know your organization. And obviously I only have a general overview, and you would provide so much more knowledge to what you represent and what you do on a day-to-day basis and how you can help creators and administrators, but only if you're comfortable. You'll hear me, and hopefully I won't make any mistakes. I got a little nervous when I saw the list. So hopefully you'll, be able to jump in and participate and whatnot. And we're going to have a question and answer as we go through the webinar, so we don't wait till the end of the webinar. I think that's probably better for people, so when we're right in the middle of whatever the content or whatever the material is that I'm covering, whatever the topic is, and you have a question, we can answer it then. We will have to be obviously mindful of time. So there's something that I'd like to share right off the bat. I created a one-page sort of very general overview of the rights that are associated in the music industry. Now, there are some peripheral rights that I'm going to touch on, but these are two rights that I am going to address, are what's most prominent in the industry. And understanding what you own and what your client owns is what's most important. So because we're in a managerial sort of role here with the manager forum, let's sort of discuss the fact that you as managers really have to be fairly understanding of where these royalties are based and how these royalties are collected, because hey, you get to commission on them at times. And also, you know, it propels your client by way of revenue streams and by obviously exposure. The more that a song is played, the more that a song is exposed to the general audience, obviously, potentially, the more income that can be made for that particular client of yours. So, you know, I'm finding a couple of my management clients really have to do this crash course in rights and royalties as well, so they understand what their client actually possesses, what they actually own. We've got labels, we've got some publicists, as I said, and some self-managed artists. I think what's most important is you really have to define who you are in the industry. In today's industry, you literally are doing everything. When you're self-managing, when you're self-producing, when you're self-releasing and whatnot. Also, you know, you really have to understand what you own. And that's what earns the income, essentially. We hear all these wonderful stories. Rihanna might get her masters back, and Prince, you know, fought for his masters and whatnot. What does that actually mean? So this is what I want to share with you all now, and hopefully I will be able to do this correctly. There we go. This is my one pager. Yes, incredibly simplistic, but something that can do that 1 hour overview of rights and royalties. So let's start with the first right, which is the master copyright. The master copyright is the recording, okay? That's what gets released to the general public. And in the Copyright Act, the definition of who owns a master recording was the maker pre-1997. Well, they updated the Copyright Act and they included a more what they thought was involved explanation as to who owns the master, and it was whomever brings together the elements of the recording. This really doesn't help us because there are various roles in the industry that could fall under this category. Managers can bring together the elements of the recording, a label, artists, obviously, a producer, even maybe a studio. So what's most important with a master copyright is defining who the end owner is going to be. And what you're going to find is if an artist signs a label and that particular agreement is that the label is going to own the master, there'll be a transfer of master copyright from the artist over to the label. If the artist has an agreement with a producer, there will also be that same language, a transfer of right of the master recording over to the artist. It really is discussed who's going to own the master, and then there should be backup documentation by way of a grant of rights that shows who is going to own the master at the end of the day. This is very important because, as you can see under the royalties section of the master copyright, there are various royalty streams and revenue streams that can be earned from the master. So you really need to define that ownership. Who owns the master recording, the album, the single, the EP, whatever it might be, what is getting released to the general public, all right? So that's the first copyright, and then we'll kind of go back to the royalty streams in a few minutes. The second type of copyright you're going to find in the music industry is what's known as the composition copyright. And I come from a publishing background. I love songwriters. I love the whole composition copyright forum, actually. That's the music and the lyrics that are contained on the recording. And what sometimes happens is this gets confused, that there are music and lyrics on a recording, but they are actually a separate copyright. Okay, and essentially what a copyright is the right to copy. If you own a copyright, whether it be the master or whether it be the composition, if you own it and someone wants to use it, they have to ask your permission. Okay, it's a little confusing for people though, because the Copyright Act says that the minute that you create this copyright, you own it. Well, that's fantastic, but you need that type of evidence to show who is going to own that particular copyright. And as I said, in a master copyright situation, that evidence is going to come by way of an agreement, by way of a grant of rights. So within a producer agreement, there'll be a clause in that agreement outlining the grant of rights, showing that the producer is transferring the right of the master copyright over to the artist or over to the label, whomever is going to own the master copyright at the end of the day. Again, if the artist is going to transfer their master copyright over to a label, there'll be that grant of rights section in their artist agreement with the label to show that they have transferred the right of the master over to the label. Now, sometimes what will happen is labels will be acquired by other labels. There'll have to be, again, that grant of rights. There has to be documentation to show who is going to own that master at the end of the day. Because from the royalty streams and from just an ownership perspective, there has to be an owning party. So that's how you would show it for a master copyright. For a composition copyright, again, if what the date that you created that copyright is the date that you own it, fantastic. How do you prove it, right? So the way that you can show ownership by way of a composition is you can have documentation, an agreement. And the best type of agreement for this type of copyright is a co-writing split form. I always suggest to songwriters to have this in their sort of toolbox of documentation, that they have a template that is a co-writing split form outlining the title of the song, the songwriters that are contained on that song, and the percentage of copyright they are going to own for this particular composition by way of what they wrote, music, lyrics, a bit of both, whatever the case is. And a little bit of a caveat there, I found that a lot of songwriters, when I was working in the publishing field, would ask me, well, hey, I wrote, you know, this hook, or I wrote this vocal line, or I wrote this particular lyric in the verse, or this particular lyric in the hook, or the bridge, or whatever. I found that I could not get involved, nor participate in the conversation of who the copyright owners are going to be for that composition at the end of the day. So you songwriters out there, you artists who are also songwriting and you're also collaborating with other songwriters, you really have to have a very clear understanding and a very sometimes hard conversation as to who is going to own what by way of the composition copyright of the song that you have written. This has to be clear from onset, because if you don't do this, again, you can see these royalty streams that are available to you. There's potential for royalties to be held up. For example, I was in a situation back in my publishing days where 2% was disputed for a particular song that was a #1 song on the Canadian R&B chart. So what SOCAN had to do, they had no choice but to, is that they had to hold all royalties associated with this composition until the dispute was resolved. And it can get resolved before the song even is released, and it should be resolved even before the song is released. So when you are collaborating with other songwriters, you're essentially co-owning the copyright of that composition amongst other parties. And you're kind of in copyright marriage for the rest of your life, because should a potential music supervisor want to use your song in a film or a television show, they need 100% approval in order to use that particular song. Officially they do. Now some, if it's a smaller production, they might get away with not getting 100% approval, but I know my music supervisors out there, and I know that they know how to very diligently find 100% approval, because they also know that there could be libel suits, there could be copyright infringement suits down the road should that song be used and one of the copyright owners has not approved their ownership portion of that copyright. I just want to stop right there and see Amy and Andrea, are there any questions? I'd like to stop every sort of 10 minutes and sort of see where we're at.
So we do have a question here.
Sure.
Someone is asking about if they've registered a song under copyright in the US office, and then they produce it with a Canadian producer. do they have to re-register? So I don't know if maybe that's confusing.
Oh, that's a great question, because we're now getting into terminology. And whoever asked that question, I'm going to call you segue person, because I was just going to get into the next topic of defining who you are. And that's an incredible, important point. You have to define who you are. So we're talking about the master copyright, where an artist, a label, or potentially a producer, those are the mainstream potential owners of a master. You define yourself as such. If you're an artist, you're defined as an artist, but you also could be defined as a songwriter. You also could be defined as a master copyright owner. And you really have to divide yourself and diversify yourself when it comes to these particular titles and when it comes to this particular terminology: producer, songwriter, artist, master copyright owner. Okay, you really have to see yourself separately in these roles, because all these royalties are paid separately. And if you start to combine your roles, you potentially can lose future royalties. So the question is, if you register a song in the US, register by way, I'm assuming, is a composition copyright, meaning you are the songwriter and you've registered your song with potentially ASCAP or BMI, who collect your performance royalties. Put a little pin in that, more on that later. Or the equivalent of ASCAP and BMI in Canada is SOCAN, which I think a lot of us know about. They do incredible member service and outreach. So, SOCAN's, almost a very prominent organization in our industry. You have to know who you are. You're the songwriter, you've registered a composition copyright, and then you said you used a producer in Canada. Well, then that opens up the question, that producer, did they do any songwriting on that particular copyright, on that particular composition copyright? Or was their role solely as a producer? Okay, so that's where this spreadsheet that I tried to be as simple as I could on, really tried to define the royalty streams based on your role. And you in the industry today probably can check mark yourself under most of these particular roles, under most of these particular revenue streams, because you're playing multiple parts in your career. You're the producer, you're the songwriter, you're the artist, or you're the co-producer, or you're the co-writer, or you're the master copyright owner. So your question really brings to my mind definition of role. You've registered the song as a composition copyright, with the owner being the songwriter. You've used a producer. Now the question is, did that producer do any co-writing on that song? If so, you may have to re-register that song in the US, and subsequently revenues and royalties will be collected in Canada for you on behalf of SOCAN. Once you register with ASCAP or BMI, SOCAN is the affiliate in Canada that will collect the Canadian royalties, essentially. So if that producer comes to you and says, hey, I feel that I wrote some of that hook on the song, you may have to re-register the song involving the producer as a co-writer, and therefore as a co-owner in the composition copyright of that song. Did that answer your question, whoever asked it? I know it could obviously open up a whole pile of worms there, because there might be other questions involved with it, but that's sort of my simplistic answer to it.
They're saying that, yes, thank you, that did answer the question, Anne-Marie.
Awesome, okay. We good to go on, or?
I think so. We've got some chat in the chat, and
okay.
I'll monitor it and bring up questions if there's questions as we go.
Wonderful. I'm sort of the kind of person that if I get off focus, just so you guys know, I'm not looking at the chats because I lose my train of thought. So I'm really relying on Andrea to tell me if anything comes up that has to be addressed right away. Please let me know. And if there's any comments, again, from my organization professionals out there, and you can clarify anything. I do teach at these schools, but I think a teacher is a better learner than a teacher. I always love to learn. So please stop me if there's any kind of erroneous information, if anything needs to be clarified. I would love to, make sure that this is a very back and forth type of dialogue when it comes to these various topics, because we want to get it right, right? So we've gone over the rights now. We know that there's this master copyright, which is the recording could potentially owned by the artist, the label, or a producer potentially. We know that there's a composition copyright. Those are the lyrics and the music contained on the recording, and understanding and recognizing various genres. Sometimes it's just instrumental, sometimes it's just a cappella lyrical, right? But whatever music and or lyrics and or music that's contained on the recording is your composition copyright. There's one area I want to address. I don't know if I have any urban songwriters and producers out there, anyone that's writing urban music. This has been my experience in the past. When I worked at Chappell, my passion, my mandate was to sign a lot of urban music. I love dancehall and hip hop and R&B. And I found that terminology can sometimes lead to decreased revenue streams simply because of terminology. So please recognize producers and songwriters, all right? Producers, most of the time, I found with producers, they are doing songwriting on their various projects. If they're hired by an artist or if they're hired by a label, sometimes they find themselves in the role of songwriters. Sometimes, you know, a song isn't going so well. There's something that just needs more spice to it. There's something that just needs more of a hook, or there's a lyric that's missing, or there's a chorus that needs to be revamped. And sometimes the producer will jump in and do some songwriting in a session. Producers out there, be very, very, very clear about your rules, okay? And understanding, again, this concept of copyright ownership. You as a producer, 90% of the time, are going to assign the master copyright over to an artist or label. Very few producers are owning masters, unless they have their own record label or unless that's what sort of they're in the business of doing. But most producers are in the role of production services, okay? You are getting your royalties from record sales, and you're getting potentially paid a producer fee, all right? And then you find yourself starting to do some songwriting on the album. Sometimes you know walking in that you might be doing some songwriting, and sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you're in the middle of a session, and you know how sessions can go. It's a creative experience, and the muse takes over, and suddenly you find yourself doing some songwriting, okay? Because you are transferring the master copyright over to the artist or label, this does not mean that you are transferring whatever composition copyright ownership you may have by way of music and lyrics that you have written for that particular composition. And this can get very, I don't know, unethical, if you will, because what labels might do is, and I might be going a little off tangent here, and I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible, but sometimes what labels will try to do is they'll try to say, okay, you producer, you get your royalties from record sales. We will pay you when we recoup the recording costs, meaning we have to pay ourselves back from record sales for all the recording costs, okay, which is fine. Producer, you were involved with the recording costs, so you have to wait to get your royalties until those recording costs are recouped. These are your producer royalties. If you did any songwriting on that particular album, your composition copyright royalties should be paid to you regardless of recoupment, okay? And you are seeing those royalties by way of mechanical royalties as a songwriter. And this is where the CMRRA comes into effect. The CMRRA stands for the Canadian Mechanical Reproduction Rights Agency. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Sometimes I mess it up. So if I see a little chat there from someone who might represent CMRRA and I'm wrong, jump in, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And Amy and Andrew will let us know. But the CMR, awesome, I did it. So either the CMRRA will collect those mechanical royalties on your behalf, songwriter, or if you're not signed up with the CMRRA, the master copyright owner or whomever's collecting those record royalties, whether they be digital or physical, they owe you mechanical royalties on record one sold. regardless how in the hole they are, regardless of how unrecouped they are from recording costs, they need to pay you the mechanical royalties regardless of recoupment if you are in that songwriter role. Okay, so songwriters and producers, attendees, and otherwise, and everyone essentially should know this. Producers are different from songwriters. So the reason why I bring up urban music is terminology is such that a lot of urban producers will say, hey, I produced that track. When in actuality, what they probably did is they composed the music for that track, which puts them in the role of songwriter. So this goes back to my soapbox moments over the course of the last half hour. Know your role, know who you are, diversify your role, divide up your roles, okay? So if you're a producer who is also songwriting, treat yourself as two separate entities. You are the producer who is earning a producer fee potentially, and potentially a producer royalty from record sales. But as a producer, you have to wait until the record label or the artist might recoup back or pay back themselves for recording costs. Okay, that's on the producer role side. The songwriter, if you're also the songwriter of the composition, of the master recording, you are owed your mechanical royalties from those same record sales, regardless of recoupment. You get paid those from record one sold, okay? Any questions there? Let me stop right there because that's sort of a big topic in a lot of ways. And again, can be dug down in so many different ways. Are we good, everybody?
I do have a question here, just on the topic of urban music, wondering if you have any commentary or advice to emerging hip hop artists who purchase beat licenses to top line over via platforms such as BeatStars. So in many of these
fantastic question. Yeah, this is right in line with what we're talking about. Okay, again, what do you own, right? When you're purchasing beats, a lot of times on these ghostwriter producer platforms and websites, you know, buying beats. I hate the term buying beats. I hate it because I don't know what I'm buying. Am I buying just the right to use the beat, but you still own the composition portion, the composition copyright? You wrote the music, you own part of the composition being the music, and I'm getting permission from you to use your music. This means I'm licensing. Okay, this means I don't own the composition or the music of that composition. This just means you've given me permission to use the composition portion. All right, or am I actually buying this beat? Are you actually granting or assigning or transferring your ownership of the composition portion over to me? Okay, think of it, my analogy for ownership when it comes to assigning a copyright versus licensing, which means you have the right to use my copyright, is buying a house, or sorry, selling a house or renting a house, okay? When I'm selling my house, that means whomever is buying it, their name is on the deed. I can't come back in 2 months or 3 months and tell them not to paint their bedroom pink or not to build a garden or not to reno the basement. I don't own that house anymore, okay? Same sort of idea applies. When you assign or transfer the right of your copyright over to someone else, they are literally buying it and they are literally owning it, okay? You have no say in anything that they do with that particular copyright, all right? When you're licensing, it means that you're renting your copyright house. It means you're allowing someone to live in your house. You're allowing them to make some minor renovations. You're allowing them to maybe build a garden if they want, but my name is on the deed and they can't do anything major to that house without my approval, okay? So that's the same as licensing, where you are licensing the beat, meaning you can use it, you can release it, you can maybe make some minor adjustments to it, but I still own it. So all of these royalties we have in front of us by way of the composition copyright means I receive those royalties, okay? You're licensing my beat, but when it gets played on radio or there's record sales or it gets picked up by a film production company, I still owe you that money and have to pay you that money as a songwriter or, sorry, as a composition copyright owner. Are we good there?
Yeah, we also have someone wondering if you can touch on the implications that has to sync. So as a rapper, if you license the beat and then say a music supervisor wants to use that song for a TV show.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna, that one question I am going to just hold on because I want to get into the royalties, and that I'm going to pick up on when I talk about synchronization royalties, when I talk about synchronization activity, because that will definitely answer the question when we get into those royalties, because it'll talk about what that actually means. Are we okay to delay that just for a bit?
I think that sounds good.
Okay, awesome. So let's get into royalties because we've only got 25 more minutes. Do you see what happens here? Like an hour just doesn't cut it. Okay, so I'm going to stop share for a minute. Well, no, I don't know how I'm going to toggle back and forth, guys. I'm not as technically sound as I would like to be. But if you look at your royalty streams here on this particular handout, let's go by the master copyright first. So the master copyright has various royalty streams. Your record sales, like those are the royalties paid to you by iTunes, or if you have a deal with Outside, or if you have a deal with Orchard, or if you have a deal with Universal, whomever, they are paying you as the copyright owner your record royalties, and it gets negotiated in your contract with that particular provider. We all know with iTunes, it's about 30 to 33% that you get off of your record royalties from digital sales, but each one is different. I'm not going to go into record royalties at this time because that's a whole other topic that you could probably do a webinar on as well. And I'm just skipping ahead just for a minute. Neighboring rights is a very interesting royalty. This is a royalty where if there is a recording and then the music and lyrics on that recording as well, neighboring rights just means public performance of that particular song. Okay, so if that song is played in a shopping mall, if that song is played in a fitness club, if that song is played in a venue that maybe has DJs come in, it essentially means that you're not seeing it live and you're not programming it. It's sort of being programmed for you. And it's in a public forum, meaning anyone can walk through, or it might be member-based, but it's essentially public. Neighboring means that anyone that's on the recording, any neighboring role on the recording might be able to access these particular royalties. And that's why you're seeing sort of down on my spreadsheet here, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit, you're seeing under producer, under artist, under musician, guest performer, under master copyright owner, under composition copyright owner, all of them embody neighboring rights or public performing royalties. And it's because the neighboring aspect of that master means all of these various roles are included on the master and on the recording essentially. So if you have any guest artists, if you have any guest musicians, if you're a producer, the master copyright owner, songwriter, you all are sort of neighbored on that recording and share in those particular royalty streams. Okay, we're going to, guys, I don't know if we'll have time to go back and forth on these websites, but I'm going to stop share here for a minute. And we're going to go to a couple of them just so you see them. I think that's important. Let's go over here. In a second. Put this down and let's go to connect. There we go. And all right. There we go. Okay, here we have Connect Music, and I'm pretty new to Connect in a lot of ways, and I find it so interesting. I like this organization because it seems to embody different services that I think is really important. But at Connect Music, very generally, and if there's anyone out there representing Connect, throw us a chat, throw us anything. If you want to jump in, I'm so happy for that. If you just want to sort of sit in the background and sort of listen to me bumble my way through it, that's fine too. But everybody definitely contact Connect Music for any more information that you might need. Connect Music collects a master copyright owner's neighboring rights royalties. Okay. The other service that I think is important that Connect provides is it provides what's called an ISRC code, an International Standard Recording Code. And that's sort of a code in which to identify your particular recording in the marketplace. So you're going to use your ISRC code when you potentially sign up with DistroKid, or should you be selling your music on Amazon. It's just a way for to identify sales for your particular product. It sort of connects your product with a code, and then that code is used every time there's a sale for your particular product and whatnot. So Connect Music, they collect your neighboring rights if you represent, or if you're the owner of a master copyright. I'm going to stop there. If you represent Connect, is there anything else that we can include by way of information there? And again, remembering this is a general overview, and all of you attendees should be going to their website and contacting these organizations for more information.
So Anne-Marie, Catherine has chimed in and said that you're doing a wonderful job. So
thank you, Catherine. I'm hoping that I'm covering everything, and you know, like what I would suggest to all of you, if you identify in any of these roles by way of copyright ownership or by way of royalty streams, have a registration day and just go through all of these various organizations. The other thing I want to say about a lot of these organizations, when I reach out to them, I can't tell you how incredible membership services are for these organizations. Resound and MROC and SOCAN and the CMRA and Connect. They're incredible. They get back to you so quickly, and they are so happy to answer any of your questions. And trust me, I ask a lot of dumb questions. So I had someone very, very patient with me go through and sort of give me a little bit of an overview. But don't be afraid to reach out to those organizations. That's what they're there for. They have a passion for music, and they want you to earn income. And a lot of times they might be collecting income on your behalf, and you're not registered yet. And they're sort of like, come on, register so we can pay these royalties out for you. So this is Connect Music. Be aware you're a master copyright owner. Connect Music licensing will enable you to collect your neighboring rights. Okay, so that's Connect. When we go through our master, I'm just going to go through so it's a little bit easier for me, or else I'm toggling back and forth. I want to go over to Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange, it's unbelievable to me how much income you can earn as an artist and as a master copyright owner with Sound Exchange. What Sound Exchange is it's an organization based in the US, and they collect your digital or satellite radio royalties, okay? So now, I can't remember the year, but you know, most cars have satellite radio already built into their system. So you have satellite radio playing. A lot of us access satellite radio. It is uncanny to me. It is unbelievable. It is amazing to me how much my clients are receiving by way of Sound Exchange royalties. Like, it is wonderful. I've got clients that are literally living on their Sound Exchange royalties in between cycles for their albums. And every time we get that Sound Exchange check, our mind boggles at the fact that we're earning these types of significant royalties from Sound Exchange. Now, obviously, your song has to be played on satellite radio, but if you get your song played on a CBC now, that kind of propels that song outward to other potential digital and satellite radio as well. So Sound Exchange, the reason why you're going to see it when I go back to my spreadsheet is Sound Exchange collects both for the master copyright owner as well as for the artists. Producers out there, in your producer agreements, it is very standard for you to receive a percentage of Sound Exchange royalties as well. From what I'm seeing, it's between 20 and 30% of Sound Exchange royalties, but highly negotiable. I don't want to speak for anyone out there when you're negotiating a producer contract, but you as well can earn these types of royalties. Okay, so this is for the artist and the copyright owner. I'm going to stop share screen and just make sure I'm on point here, because I want to go back to my spreadsheet of my royalty streams and make sure we're doing this here. Okay, so we've got Connect, we've got Sound Exchange. Sampling, our urban people out there. So with sampling, you have to get permission from the master copyright owner of the sound recording of the master copyright in order to sample their particular recording, okay? So whomever owns that original master copyright is who you're going to have to pay, and potentially who's going to co-own your new master copyright recording. Be aware of that as well. Sampling, again, a whole other webinar series. It's a whole course in itself, but I did a quick overview there just because we're running out of time. I really want to get into synchronization. I'm not sure if we've got any music supervisors out there. There's two incredible music supervisors in Canada. I'm not going to name names yet because I don't know, privacy's sake and whatnot, but you know, these guys are fantastic. They not only place songs in film and TV, they also negotiate clearance of songs. And this is what that means. I love synchronization. I worked for a film production company for about 7 years. We put out 2 documentaries, and I got to clear 130 songs, some of them being Elvis Presley songs, for a particular documentary. I cut my teeth with syncs when it came to this particular film production company. What syncs are is the synchronization of audio and visual. And if there are any music supervisors out there, again, pipe up, make sure that I've got the information correct, jump in with any information you might have that might augment my my discussion here. But the synchronization of audio and visual. And there's so many components to a synchronization license. There's the type of right. Are they using it for any kind of media? Are they only using it for TV? Are they only using it for internet? Is it going to be shown theatrically? All of those various rights. What's the type of use that they're using the song in? Is it background use? Is it foreground use? And I know I'm throwing a lot of terminology out there. Again, another webinar series just for synchronization. But what gets determined is a fee, okay? And that fee is paid to the master copyright owner as well as to the composition copyright owner, okay? And that fee is negotiated based on what types of rights they need clearance from you. Is the film or television show, again, going to be used in a theater? Is it going to be shown in a theater? Is it going to be on Netflix? Is it going to be on DVD? All those various types of rights. How they're using the song. Is it going to be in the background of a scene? Is it going to be in the foreground of the scene? Is it going to be at the beginning of an episode? Is it going to be a credit run? Is it going to be a theme song? You know, those types of uses. And the duration of the song. How long is the song that they're using? Okay, so all of those components come together, and a fee is negotiated and agreed upon between the master copyright owner, the composition copyright owner, and the film or television production company. Okay, so that fee is paid to the master copyright owner and the composition copyright owner. All right, so that's synchronization. It's a fee. Okay, it's money, it's a check, it's an e-transfer to you as the copyright owner. There's one little caveat here when it comes to composition copyright that does not pertain to the master copyright. In synchronization, for the music and lyrics, for the songwriters and publishers, if that film or television show is on TD broadcast, is on NBC, CTV, you know, the network sort of thing, there is a synchronization or performance royalty that gets paid to the composition copyright owner, right? And it's the PROs, the performing rights organizations, SOCAN, ASCAP, BMI, who collect these royalties and pay them to the songwriters and the publishers, okay? This royalty is not paid to master copyright owners usually, all right? It's only paid to composition copyright owners. I would like to give you a little, maybe a little tip, if you will. Music supervisors love to look for songs that have already been written, but have various recordings. We see various TV shows and film productions out there where we'll hear a song and it's a different type of recording than the original. All right, little tiny story. I worked on a documentary called Jews in Baseball, An American Love Story, and we wanted to license All Along the Watchtower, all right? Performed by Jimi Hendrix, written by Bob Dylan. We reached out to Bob Dylan, And he gave his approval in literally 10 minutes because he loves Jews and he loves baseball. So we were right in the pocket for Bob Dylan. Literally 10-minute turnaround of an approval. He wrote the song. Therefore, we cleared the composition copyright. We cleared the music and the lyrics, meaning we got approval. We cleared it. However, when we went to the Jimi Hendrix estate to get approval for the recording of that song, the Jimi Hendrix version recording, we couldn't get approval, right? They said no, they declined us, okay? So we're like, well, what are we gonna do? We went back to Bob Dylan and asked if we could use his recording of All Along the Watchtower. So we cleared the composition copyright with Bob Dylan, and we're able to clear the master copyright with Bob Dylan as well. So usually what music supervisors do is they will want to clear the composition copyright first because they want the music and lyrics. They need approval for the music and lyrics first. If they don't get approval for the music and lyrics, they obviously can't get approval for the master recording. And then they go for the master recording clearance. And sometimes a film director will want a song, but record it in a different manner. So say they'll want a punk, what everyone knows is a real punk or rock song, and maybe it's recorded by a soft, sweet spoken type of songwriter to give it a different kind of edge, to give it a different kind of sound, all within the vision of the film director, right? So a little tip for you, budding artists, if you have a writer block day or you have a recording block day, go out and record a master. Now you do have to get permission from the composition copyright owner, because remember, you're using their music and lyrics. But if you record a cover and you pitch it to a music supervisor, they will go and get clearance from the composition copyright owner, and they'll have clearance from you as the master copyright owner. And I find a lot of music supervisors, their feedback to me is they're always looking for new recordings of existing songs, recognizing that you do have to get clearance from that original composition copyright owner. So we've got under, and I'm trying to speed up here. This happens to me all the time when I'm teaching. I will take my time and go through everything. And in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to try and speed through everything. So I'm not going to go back to any websites. I'll stop there for a sec. Any questions? Anything I should be covering in the next 2 minutes?
I think that you're good to continue with what you've got, Anne-Marie.
Okay, we've got about 8 minutes from my, or less than that, probably 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I've sort of delved into synchronization. Now we're going into composition copyright. We've talked about mechanical royalties. Those come from record sales. We've talked about synchronization royalties. Performance royalties are live performance, meaning that, and it's not in every country, but in Canada, if you perform the music and lyrics of a song, and you're performing it live with a ticket price of over $6, you potentially can earn a royalty. And so can have a very good system online where you can enter in all of your show dates, the venue that you played at, and your set list in order for them to be able to collect your royalties for live performance. How that works is SOCAN goes around and has to license venues. And usually who pays this royalty for live performance are concert promoters. So a festival is a concert promoter potentially. Sometimes a venue is a concert promoter, Live Nation, Collective Concerts. Whoever's the concert promoter would have to pay this particular royalty to SOCAN for any songs that are performed at a live show with a ticket price of over $6. The SOCAN or performance royalties, are also public performances of songs, again, our neighboring rights, radio broadcasts, the digital component of radio as well. And they're all collected by, what's known as PROs, Performing Rights Organizations, and the one we have here in Canada is SOCAN. Okay, so that's the long and short of copyright ownership and the potential royalties associated. Again, knowing your rules. And artist royalties, they come from record sales, whatever your artist contract says with the label, whatever your artist royalty rate is, you usually have to wait for everything to be recouped. So you're not going to really see that royalty for too easily if they're spending a lot of money on your marketing and promotion and your recording and your video and your tour support and whatnot. But those are artist royalties that are paid by the label or by the master copyright owner. You'll also see neighboring rights, again, that public performance. And you'll see again, as I showed you with Sound Exchange, your digital radio and satellite radio royalty. If you're a producer, you get your royalty from record sales. You get your royalty from neighboring rights as well, and you get your royalty from digital radio, being Sound Exchange. And if you are a musician or a guest performer, remember you can sign up with MROC or RAX or Resound, and they will collect your neighboring rights, being your public performance. I'm trying to keep it to our deadline of 5 o'clock. I'm sure there's, hey, she didn't cover that. Hey, she didn't do this. Hey, she didn't talk about that. But I'm hoping that that's enough of an overview for an hour.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anne Marie.